Hi everyone, welcome to another model answer video. In this particular video, I'm going to be talking to you about a question where you're going to be looking at the challenges in a LIC or NEE in a city that you've studied, and including that information that you've learned in an exam question where you're also thinking about a figure that includes a photograph. I hope you find it useful as ever, and as always, at the end of the video, have a pause on the model answer that I've written and use it to help you inform your own notes. Have a look, see what you think. The question we're going to be looking at today is to study the photograph of a rubbish dump in the Payatas slum in Manila, a city in the Philippines. And the question asks us this for 6 marks. Use the photograph and a case study of a city in a LIC or NEE to assess the challenge of providing services to the city's population. Now, the photograph clearly shows a huge number of people in a rubbish dump. Possibly, judging by the bulldozer, this is a landfill site, and they're carrying sacks, leaning over and combing through the waste, and just look at the guy there in the yellow t-shirt, evaluating, judging, thinking, is this worthwhile for me to take away from this place? These people are possibly using the discarded waste as a source of income, or a source of resource for themselves. It's possible that they're making a living from reselling these items or their components. There are indeed huge industries around extracting metals from electronics, for example, in places like Kibera in Kenya, and similar seems to be occurring here in the Philippines. You might also make inferences about the people in the photo, the implicit lack of education, or the possibility of many people working in the informal sector being young and therefore not in school, where they might be able to gain skills to earn better paid formal work. The mark scheme allows us to consider services as a very broad concept, which may include the waste disposal we've talked about here, but could also be clean water and sanitation systems, energy, health and education. You don't need to refer to all of these. 2 is fine, but you do need to refer to at least 2, as the question states services as plural. The question is asking us to assess, to make a judgment about what we're seeing and the degree of challenge that exists in a city providing services to its people. Here, it's fairly obvious that the photo is leading us to consider waste management or waste disposal. It's clearly a problem when waste accumulates in urban areas, and many of you will make the link to the narrow, poorly paved and steep thoroughfares in favelas in Rio de Janeiro, where municipal waste services can't exist in the way we're used to seeing in places like the UK. Indeed, most people transport their own waste away from their homes lest it fester and decay, inviting vermin and disease. You could approach the assessment element of this question as an evaluation of the scale of the challenge of providing adequate services for people. To use the example of Rio again, there is also a challenge in providing access to social services. Only 55% of Rio's population have access to a health clinic, and only half of children living there continue their education past the age of 14. Alternatively, you could consider that in Rio, many of the favelas have been improved. In Rochina, 90% of the housing is now brick-built with electricity, running water and sewage, and the favela has its own newspapers and radio station. This therefore suggests the challenge is limited. In any case, you need to draw on this kind of case study knowledge and use it alongside the photograph to show that assessment, to access level 3 in the mark scheme and therefore earn all 6 marks, you have to answer every part of the question. So, let's have a look next at my model answer. This photograph shows people filling sacks with rubbish from the dump in Manila. This suggests that they are foraging for items that they can sell, which would be a type of informal labour often undertaken by children. This means that those children are not able to receive an education at school, so they are unable to learn how to read and write and get better paid formal work in adulthood. Similarly, in Rio de Janeiro, access through steep slopes favelas like Rochina is challenging, so waste disposal is informal and not organised by the government. This means that there is a risk of attracting vermin which can carry disease and impact negatively on the health of the local people. However, Rochina has improved and many houses have running water and sewerage. This will have a positive impact as the risk of waterborne diseases spreading through the favela is reduced. Overall, cities like Rio and Manila face significant challenges in managing waste that can have a detrimental effect on people's access to education and to their health, But as shown by Regina, these can be mitigated by improving the provision of services like clean water and sanitation. Let's break down this model answer then into its constituent parts, starting firstly with the point. These are the ideas that I've got about Rio de Janeiro and from the photograph, the key points that I want to get across in my answer. The function of some of these points is to impart my knowledge. In other cases, it's to talk about what I've seen in the photo and so access the marks for AO3. Down at the bottom of my answer, in my conclusion, the purpose of those points is to show my evaluation. This starts to become more evident when we look at where I have used evidence in my answer. This is shown in gold. I've started by talking about something I can see in the photograph. This photograph shows people filling sacks with rubbish from the dump in Manila. I've then named Rio de Janeiro as a city and Regina as a place within Rio, reinforcing that later in my answer. Next, in blue, we have where my explanation is. And here I'm accessing marks at AO2, showing my understanding of how these things impact on people. This helps to answer the part of the question that is asking us about the challenges for people. Finally, and possibly most importantly for this question, are my links. And these are where I'm also showing evaluation by using words like similarly and however. I'm showing that I'm looking at different points of view. I've made this very clear by talking about the impact negatively on the health on the local people and a positive impact as the risk of waterborne diseases being reduced. I've also used my conclusion to show the link here because my conclusion is evaluating the whole of the other two paragraphs I've written. You'll notice I'm not introducing any new ideas in my conclusion, but I'm summing up and making clear to the examiner that I have considered all of the different parts of the question. In my conclusion, I've got an appreciation of the challenges, but I've also got an appreciation of how those challenges can be mitigated, and therefore my judgment and assessment of this as being a less important problem is made clearer. I've also made sure to mention all of the places that I've mentioned earlier in my answer.